right. Lincoln Riley has revamped the USC roster very quickly upon his December hiring. And we got Spencer McLaughlin on the line from Locked On Pac-12 to discuss some USC football. So, Spencer, where do you stand on the Lincoln Riley scale? And I'll take it all the way from guru, one of the very best coaches in the country, enormous success at Oklahoma, of course, dominated the conference, came this close to beating Georgia to get to a national championship game, all those things. Maybe the one disclaimer would be the excuse could be that you don't recruit quite the elite talent at Oklahoma, therefore that couldn't be held against him. I'll go to the opposite end of the spectrum. Everybody wins at Oklahoma. That's been going on since the 1950s. He's no different. The team got a little bit worse every year he was there, and obviously he bailed on the team and didn't necessarily, by some accounts, show up and ready to coach and give it his all this past season. So Lincoln Riley, where do you rank him?
That's a pretty harsh assessment of Lincoln Riley there. But, as head coaches go, if you're saying the team got a little bit worse each year while he was there, which is certainly a defendable point, while they were still contending for Big 12 conference championships and winning them for a couple seasons, just not in 2021, I'd say that's the mark of a really high-level head coach. I think offensively, he's as smart a mind as you're going to find in college football. And I think he's known first and foremost as being a quarterback guru, right? And that's no surprise. You develop back-to-back number one overall picks, and then Jalen Hurts as well, who I don't think was going in the second round until he got to Oklahoma and played for Lincoln Riley. Now he's starting for the Eagles. Make of that what you will. I don't think Jalen Hurts is going to take you to a Super Bowl, but he can clearly win football games in the NFL, and that's not something I was too sure of when he was at Alabama, but Riley certainly changed the perception of him to where he was a second-round pick, whereas before he probably would have been like fourth or fifth. So that reputation is very well established. Now, the one counterpoint to that is Spencer Rattler, and that did not go the way it was supposed to. I mean, he was looking like he could be a future number one overall pick. Instead, he's leaving the program there in Oklahoma, where, as you also fairly point out, everybody's won at Oklahoma. It's not as if he was out there building up Oklahoma State or Tulsa into a behemoth out there in the middle of the country, but he still took them to a very high level as a coach. And so I think what he's doing at USC is new for him. And it's important for everyone to understand that, because I'm sure there are plenty of USC fans out there who have hopes and expectations that he'll win 10 or 11 games in year one. And I don't think that's super feasible. I could see 10. I do not see 11. With this schedule, I do not see 11 wins in year one. In year 2 or 3, I could maybe see 11 wins because the recruiting ceiling is higher at USC in Los Angeles than it was at Oklahoma, though let's not pretend that he was recruiting like a slouch over there, because he's known as a quarterback guru, an offensive mind first. But Oklahoma had high-level recruiting classes. They weren't bringing in big-time defensive players, but they were recruiting at a top 10 level year in and year out. And I have no doubts that he'll be able to succeed. I think in year one, it's probably a 9-3 season. I think they'll have a stumble where you don't expect. And then between Notre Dame, UCLA, and Utah, I think they probably go 1-2 in those games, and that gets you to 9-3. But if you're a USC fan, I'm not sure what's wrong with that. Like, if they go 9-3 and USC fans are not happy about that, I'm not sure what your expectations really are, because give me the coach that comes in, turns it around in 1 year and wins 12 games after you went 4-8 in 2021. It takes at least 2 years for it to really fully hit the ground running, sometimes 3, sometimes 4. And this is a new thing for him, because at Oklahoma, he was the offensive coordinator, and then he just got promoted to head coach. It was just kind of a slight increase in responsibility. But this is different. This is a complete rebuild by USC standards. If they're going to get back to the college football playoff, if they had, another head coach there, say they'd hired like James Franklin, no one would be expecting that he's getting to the college football playoff in year 1 or even year 2. They'd probably give it 3 or 4 years, probably 2.5 to 3 or so, to be in that sort of competitive landscape nationally. So I think they'll be good. I think they'll be one of the best in the Pac-12 because they'll score a lot of points, but they're still not going to be able to stop anybody in year one, though they have made some notable transfer additions that should help. But it's also not like USC is now operating under the tutelage of a defensive coordinator who was renowned for his big vaunted defenses there at Oklahoma and Alex Grinch. And I get why Lincoln Riley brings him with him, but Oklahoma didn't get to that national championship game because they allowed 54 points to Georgia in the Rose Bowl. It was a no double overtime game, but they couldn't get a stop. And so that's going to take some time. Their defense is never going to have to be elite for them to win games, but it does have to be competent. And last year, USC's defense was anything but competent. They allowed 62 points to UCLA at home. That's just not something that should ever happen. And I think they'll be better with some of the new players, but you can't make that big of a leap in 1 year.
No, you can't. The hope is that the offense is just super explosive, and I'm not necessarily looking at aggregate totals, looking for a top 5 offense in the country. It's more about what do they do against the quality opponents. If they rack up 65 against Rice, that's great. But hey, give me 45 against Rice and still win by 4 touchdowns, and then be productive against Utah and UCLA, etc. The defense deplorable last year, one of the worst 3 in any metric in the Pac-12, and they patched it up with some nice players through the transfer portal, but it's not going to be great from a personnel standpoint, and the overall team's not great from the standpoint of depth. And football's a depth sport, and you need player upon player upon player. So it's an intriguing team that obviously has star players in key positions, but and a schedule that's manageable with, of course, very difficult out-of-conference opponent to deal with in Notre Dame as usual. So,
yeah, and I think the schedule is part of the reason I'm comfortable saying that they'll win 9 games. Because, like I said, I think you've got on paper 3 losable ones, and then you're probably going to have a stumble in year one, and that's just generally a theme in college football, unless you're a college football playoff caliber team, right? I mean, last year, Penn State, their season kind of went off the rails after this, but Penn State lost to Illinois. Going into that game, how many people were picking Illinois to win? Or years ago in the Big Ten, Iowa beat Michigan, and Michigan was a much better team that year. I mean, you just see it year in and year out that for top 25 caliber programs that are not at a college football playoff level, which no one is expecting USC to be in year one, you're going to lose a game that you probably should. Even college football playoff caliber teams, Oregon a season ago was in the college football playoff discussion for 80% of the year after their win against Ohio State. They lost to a miserable 3-9 Stanford team in a game that, look, was poorly officiated down the stretch. But why in the world was it close? You didn't have your offensive coordinator, sure. But again, why was it close? Why was that a game? Why did Stanford have an opportunity to drive down the field and win it at the end? It shouldn't have been there. But again, teams that are not going to have a perfect season, which is most everybody, you should expect them to have a stumble here and there. And we should not come on here and declare that the world will be ending if and when that does happen. It's part of the natural progression of a college football season.
Got a couple of Clemson teams that took a loss to Pitt, a decent Pitt team, but not a great Pitt team by any stretch.
They're average.
Bad Syracuse team.
Yeah. Like it's just all the time, everywhere you look. I mean, Alabama last year lost to Texas A&M, who's a good team. Was Alabama better? Yeah. I mean, if they played again, if they had somehow met, I don't know the divisions off the top of my head, but if Texas A&M had met them in the SEC championship game, who in their right mind would pick A&M to win again? Anybody? Bueller? No, I just it's not something that you would think would happen, but sometimes the better team does not always win. That's what makes college football so exciting, is on a given Saturday, an inferior team can be better than a better team for 60 minutes of football. They won't have a better season. They won't have a better record, right? Purdue last year, who'd they beat? Michigan State, who they were not as good as when the season came to an end, though Purdue was a solid team. But they've upset Ohio State before, right? in a
Yeah,
season where
Thursday
Purdue,
upset.
yeah, like Purdue is a perennial upset pick because they do it time and again. They're not having better seasons than these teams they're beating. They're having better Saturdays. Happens every year.